Hey, everyone. So in one of my recent videos, I mentioned, and I think I've said it a few times, that from the perspective of the enemies of Judaism and the enemies of Christianity, whether it's the Muslims or it's the atheist left, they hate Judaism and Christianity for the same reasons. And from their if we look at it from that perspective, our disagreement between Jews and Christians is really an internal disagreement, right? And basically, from the perspective of the enemy, we're the same, but we're actually not. There's actually a difference in the enemy's approach to Judaism and Christianity that was explained incredibly by the great British commentator and thinker and public intellectual Melanie Phillips. And I want to watch this speech in its entirety, and then I've got a few things to say about it, but it's a remarkable speech. So here it is. This is Melanie Phillips, the great Melanie Phillips.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon with so many people who really do get it. It's a great consolation to know that you're all out there fighting the good fight. Ladies and gentlemen, a war against Europe and the West is underway to conquer it for Islam. A war against the Jewish world is underway to exterminate it. These two things are umbilically connected. You can't understand the onslaught against the Jewish world unless you understand how Europe and the West have been attacking themselves for so many decades. You can't understand the attack by the West on itself unless you understand the centrality of Judaism to its existence. In my view, the West will only save itself if it comes to understand that Israel and the Jews are the solution to its own existential predicament. At present, it does not. At present, it behaves as if Israel is the problem and the Jews are expendable. So let me unpick all this for you. The barbaric attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, threw down a challenge to the West. Would it support civilization or barbarism? It has not supported civilization. After October 7, one might have thought the world would have sympathized with Israel's defense against an explicitly genocidal agenda, a seven-front war waged by Iran and its proxies to wipe Israel off the map and kill every Jew. Instead, apparently triggered by the single biggest attack on Jews since the Holocaust, much of the so-called civilized world has turned against Israel and the Jewish people. Anti-Semitism is always with us, but this has been something different. This has been a global attack of unprecedented scale against Israel and the Jewish world, which has been sustained. October the 7th fired a starting gun for what the Islamists believed and still believe is their final victory against first the Jews of Israel and then the Christian West. The demonstrations that started on Western streets while the Israelis were still being slaughtered on October 7 are not protests against Israel. They're not protests for the Palestinian Arabs. They are, instead, a delirious assertion of Islamic power over Western streets. For the past 2 years, hate mobs have chanted with impunity for the destruction of Israel, the murder of Jews, jihad against the West on the streets of Western cities, while the police have stood by, failing to enforce their own laws against intimidation and incitement. This has reinforced the Islamists' exultant belief that they have cowed the West into submission and this has incentivized ever more open incitement to jihad against the West. What we've lived through for these past 2 years has been a frenzied campaign to demonize and delegitimize Israel with lies. The media has been pumping out Hamas propaganda as credible, even when it is patently ridiculous. I mean, Israel's alleged genocide is, it would seem, the very first genocide in history where the genocidists have provided their victims with hundreds of thousands of tons of food and moved hundreds of thousands of these victims out of harm's way. The statistics produced by the Hamas of the numbers killed during the war, which have failed to identify among these casualties one single combatant and claim that every single death was a civilian killed by Israel, suggests that Gaza is the first society on earth to have totally abolished natural death. This is a truly miraculous achievement. Zionism, the self-determination of the Jewish people in their ancestral homeland, has been redefined as Nazism and Zionists as beyond the pale. Israeli self-defense against genocide has been branded as genocide. Open demonization of the Jews with brazen and ancient tropes of Jews controlling the world in their own interests are now rampant. This deranged obsession has been normalized in our universities, among the professions, across the culture, laundered by the entire global humanitarian and human rights establishment, which has weaponized this by lawfare through the Hamas-sympathizing United Nations and its echo chamber NGOs like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty and the international courts. Amazing, incredible. If you care about the survival of Europe and the West, you'd better believe it. It's a pathological discourse not applied to any other nation, people, or cause on earth. An unholy alliance between Islamists, those forces of Islam who believe in holy war to Islamize the world, and progressives who make common cause with them in their hatred of Israel and Jews and their hatred of the West. The result has been a physical and verbal onslaught on Jews in Britain, in France, in the Netherlands, and in really every Western country where the Islamo-leftist alliance holds cultural power. Now, instead of calling all this out as an unconscionable war against the Jews and upon civilization, Western governments have been fueling it. The United Kingdom, France, and others have parroted the lies about famine, starvation, disproportionate killing by Israel. Governments in Europe, the graveyard of the Jewish people over centuries, have been recycling the genocidal lies of Islamists determined to exterminate the Jewish people and conquer the West. This matters not just because it's an offense against decency and humanity. It matters not just because Israel is crucial to the West's security and military defense. It matters because Israel and the Jewish people are central to the war against the West on a civilizational level. The foundational structure of Western civilization was, of course, Christianity. But Christianity was founded upon Judaism, and it's the Hebrew Bible which has been the source of the West's conscience, the internalization of right and wrong, respect for human life, justice and compassion, moral responsibility and duty to others. Today, these principles have been replaced by ideologies all about putting the individual first. After a decades-long attack on core Western values that are rooted in the Bible. This has destroyed truth and morality. It's replaced truth by power. Objective truth was abolished. Everything is instead relative, a matter of subjective opinion. Feelings and emotion have trumped facts and evidence. If there's no truth, there can be no lies. So lies about Israel are believed as truths, and truths are dismissed as mere opinions of the partisans of a cause deemed illegitimate. Cultural relativism means you can't say the West is better than any other culture. The West was born in the original sins of colonialism and exploitation. The Western nation and its culture are seen as a source of division, prejudice, and war. These have to be replaced by universalism, representing the brotherhood of man. But the West's core values are not universal at all. They are deeply particular, rooted in biblical values. This unprecedented onslaught against the Jews has occurred because the Jews are central to Western civilization, a culture against which the West's educated classes have themselves venomously turned. In other words, October the 7th turbocharged the West's decades-long process of cultural suicide. This vacuum that has been achieved has been exploited by the Islamists. The Islamists understand very well that the Jews are central to the West. As they repeatedly say, first we'll destroy the Jews, then the Christians. And this program is well underway throughout the West, throughout Europe, with only a few exceptions in Eastern Europe. Europe is losing its identity through mass immigration, particularly of Muslims who refuse to integrate and who expect Western cultures to adapt to Islam instead. Many Western Muslims are model Western citizens, but an enormous and unsustainable number are not. The West's reaction is to ignore this and submit to it. It denounces any attempt to call it out as Islamophobia. Why does the West behave like this? First of all, it's fear. The numbers are very large, the threats of violence are explicit and backed by actual terrorism. Second, for decades, the West has told itself that it's racist to think people from the developing world can do anything wrong. The default position of the Western liberal is that people from the developing world are oppressed by the West. They are therefore victims. Because they are victims, they can do no wrong, while the West, being their victimizers, can do nothing right. And Israel is considered one of the victimizers. Under this ideology, Jews can never be victims because they are said to control everything. They control finance, they control the law, they control the media, they control industry. This, of course, is paranoid anti-Semitism. So at its core, the default position of the Western liberal is deeply anti-Jew. Ignoring the threat to itself, the West therefore blames Israel for defending itself against that same threat. We've all gone through the looking glass. Islamists understand the West far better than the West understands itself. Islamists understand that religion is the moral scaffolding of a culture. Without it, that culture collapses. Now, the key bridgehead in this has been support for the Palestinian cause, the default position for every Western progressive and which is treated as their badge of conscience. Palestine cause is the destruction of Israel. Look at their maps, their emblems. Palestine is the whole of Israel. That's what they want. Listen to what they teach their children, to hate and murder Jews, not Israelis, Jews. Observe their Nazi-style demonization of Jews as rats or snakes or octopuses, monstrous demonic figures said to be secretly controlling the world in their own interests. This is why many Jews in Britain and the rest view the forest of Palestine flags on their street as a forest of Nazi flags. The Palestine cause, in my view, has corrupted Western discourse and thinking. Those who've embraced this cause parrot the very same blood libels about Israel, the same visceral disgust of Jews, the same poisonous fantasies, the same recycling of the ancient stereotypes of Jewish supremacy, the chosen people, the blood libels, and the West calls this conscience. This is the same inverted thinking that accuses the Israeli Jewish victims of genocidal assault of being the genocidal aggressors, and it claims that the Islamists' agenda to conquer the West is a defense against Islamophobia. Palestinianism is the Trojan horse for anti-Semitism, and anti-Semitism is the Trojan horse for the attack on Western civilization. Anti-Semitism isn't about the Jews. It says nothing about the Jews. What it says is that those who hold these views are degenerate, dehumanizing barbarians. A society of degenerate, dehumanizing barbarians will not survive and doesn't deserve to do so. So what's to be done? Plenty is to be done. We must all speak out against these lies. We must reassert, celebrate, promote, and defend the core values of the Western nation rooted in the West's historic tradition and institutions. We must turn the universities back into the crucibles of reason rather than what they've become, which is engines for the destruction of reason. We must restore education as the transmission of Western culture, prioritize the married family, defend the nation's borders, face down Islamization, reassert the core value of one law for all, curb immigration, deport Islamic extremists, and ban Sharia law, which recognizes no superior secular authority and is therefore fundamentally an assault on Western liberal democracy. Israel's message to the West is that the Western nation-state is not, as is often said, the route to nationalism and fascism. The Western nation-state is essential to defend freedom, democracy, and the core values of European and Western society. The message that Israel has to the West is this, that a culture that understands and values what it is will live, while a culture that despises itself and wants to erase its particular and historic identity will die. Israel's message to the West, and it could not be more important at this moment in history, is that in order to survive, A culture has to choose life. This is a lesson that Europe and the West, I'm afraid, have yet to learn. Thank you very much.
Palestinianism is the Trojan horse for anti-Semitism, and anti-Semitism is the Trojan horse for the assault on Western civilization. That is a stunning statement by Melanie Phillips, and I want to unpack it a little bit. See, when I said in my intro, and I've said it in previous videos, that the enemies of Judaism and the enemies of Christianity are the same, and they hate us for the same reason. But that doesn't mean that we are being treated the same by them. Palestinianism is a Trojan horse for anti-Semitism, and anti-Semitism is a Trojan horse for the attack on Western civilization. So when we talk about Israel being on the front lines of the battle for Western civilization, that is not a geographic statement about the fact that Israel happens to be in the Middle East, and that's where Islam reigns. It's about that too, but that's not fundamentally what it's about. This is what Melanie Phillips is saying. The attacks on the Palestinianism, which itself is a phony, fabricated identity. It's the trans version of political identities, right? Meaning, I'm going to state that I have a certain identity, which is empirically, factually incorrect. There's no such identity. But you're forced to acknowledge my identity. I'm forcing you because it is immoral of you not to acknowledge my phony, made-up identity. Palestinianism is the Trojan horse for anti-Semitism. Right? It's a phony identity that was designed to destroy Israel. I always say that ask anyone who's talking about a Palestinian state in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, why from 1948 to 1967, when those lands were in the hands, Judea, Samaria, Gaza were in the hands of Egypt and Jordan, why was no one calling for the creation of a Palestinian state? And the answer is very simple. Nobody cared because those lands were under Muslim rule. They don't care about a Palestinian state. They just don't want Jews to govern any part, to own any part of these lands. That's what's going on here. But the attacks in the West, the Palestinianism is about erasing the Jews. It is a Trojan horse for anti-Semitism. It normalizes and makes politically correct hatred of the Jewish people. That's what she means by that. And that hatred of the Jewish people is itself the gateway drug. It's the Trojan horse for hatred of the West. Hatred of the West. And that's why what Jerusalem is Jerusalem the land, the city described in the Bible? Or is that erased, right? And that's what Jerusalem becomes, and that speaks to the fundamental foundations of Western civilization, which are the biblical values. It's the erasure of all of that, and it begins with the erasure of the Jews, which is the erasure of the state of Israel, and that is what Palestinianism is. And this is just a remarkable speech by Melanie Phillips. She's fantastic. And so in the Red Green Alliance studies that we continue to do on this channel, this is a speech that is worthy of reviewing. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought of the speech yourself. Let me know if there were any quotes in there from Melanie that you thought were also powerful. Again, the Trojan horse quote, that's very powerful. Palestinianism is a Trojan horse for anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a Trojan horse for the assault on Western civilization. All right, God bless everyone. And, please keep watching and like and share and check out what we're doing at Israel 365.